Hello, it's Jack Tutor here of Attention Magazine. Welcome to Crucial Listening, the podcast where I speak with musicians and sound artists about 3 albums that are important to them. My guest this time is Mattin, who is an artist, musician, and theorist working conceptually with noise and improvisation. I discovered Mattin actually through his podcast Social Discipline with Miguel Prado, which I thoroughly recommend. Mattin has also written a book which expanded also into workshops. That's Social Dissonance, wherein Mattin explores the amplification of alienation in performance and how that can shift the emphasis from the sonic to the social. And quite fresh off the back of that, or in amongst that, you have the creation of his new record, Expanding Concert, which came out back in May this year. This is a durational work that took place over 5 years, featuring 5 public interventions occurring at 5 different spaces belonging to Galerias Municipi in Lisbon, Portugal. And responding to each intervention were 5 writers who wrote a text. You also have various collaborators, musical collaborators, 1 new collaborator joining each year as the concert progressed. I mean, there's so much material here, and that's even before you really get to the content. So within the record itself, you have the edited documentation of each of these interventions, which contain explicitly musical elements, but also snapshots of the interventions wherein you hear these kind of like social ruptures that occur, these moments where the conventions of a concert, as we know it, are kind of challenged to what sounds like the discomfort of at least some people present. There is so much to unpack within this set. I've had such a good time doing it, and it was great to hear from Mattin as well and get some insights as to his experiences of putting this all together. And then obviously we talked about 3 important albums, and what a great discussion. 3 totally different records. Really enjoyed the back and forth with Mattin on this. So if you're enjoying the podcast, you can support it over at ko-fi.com/crucial listening. You can pay monthly or one-off, any amount you please, to help keep the podcast ticking. Big thanks. And I think that's it for the preamble. This is Mattin on Crucial Listening.
You're meant to be replying with your music. I'm sorry.
I could not hear the last part.
I thought you were meant to be replying with your music.
Yeah, we will at some point.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
We're waiting then.
Hello Mattin, welcome to Crucial Listening.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. So you're here to talk about 3 important albums. Before I get to those, I want to talk about your new album, Expanding Concert. So this is described as a 5-year-long concert, which includes 5 public interventions, 1 a year, held at spaces owned by Lisbon's Galerias Municipais. The fact that it's labelled as being 5 years long, I find it really interesting because it seems to point to an aspect of the concert that's unbroken and continues in the gap between these specific interventions. I mean, you had a writer attend each and then write about it in the aftermath. But could you tell me a bit more about what Expanding Concert looks like outside of these public interventions, or in the gap in between them?
Well, the idea was to not make such a distinction between where the moment where the interventions take place in a given space, and then where the time in between when one person is trying to make sense of what happens. And so it's like making it more porous, and in regards to time and space, but at the same time allowing for a reflection on what does it mean to do something at a given time in a specific context, like it's in a specific city like Lisbon, which is obviously going through a transformation, and it's a very strong transformation, and we all went through these 5 years. And the idea was to incorporate all those kind of historical events, important events that happen both globally, and then more specifically, things that happen concretely in Lisbon, to kind of incorporating them into the process of improvisation. So then the text that the person who writes will then influence and affect what we will do in the next intervention. So it was, I guess I've been trying to, play conceptually with what is a concert, and, play with duration, and trying to incorporate not only history, but a kind of historical understanding, and trying to allow for a reflection that goes beyond the reflection that might occur in just the specific time of the concert or the intervention and a given time and place. So somehow to situate where that improvisation within a larger scale, because I guess my problem with some of the assumptions or approaches to improvisation is almost as if we come into a tabula rasa, that we come into a place, we express ourselves, then we leave. But obviously there are many determinations that, affect how we improvise. And very often in improvisation, these are not so much taken into account. And here I wanted them to be a crucial part of the whole process.
I guess this is going to intersect with the question I'm going to ask now, which is how the first concert begins. So in the booklet, it describes the fact that you're there doing this, very first public intervention. And then the first thing you say is, any questions? Which I found very funny, because I can imagine being in that audience, and according to the codes that I guess mainly define these kind of concerts, they come at the end. Like, people expect to have some kind of context with which to formulate a question, but I guess given everything you're laying out here, given the porosity between the concert and everything unfolding outside, there should always be questions to ask, right? But could you tell me about what made you want to instigate the whole thing, or the first intervention, with any question?
Well, I guess I was coming from having done a very big project for me, which is the social dissonance, which is a score, which is both is like a score, a book, and then it was also a durational concert that happened in 2017 in Documenta 14, as part of Documenta 14 in Athens and Kassel. And there, the idea was to improvise with the audience, and through this score will allow is to explore what this concept of social dissonance is with the audience. And in order to do this, I will try to prepare the audience with questions, movements, suggestions, and then from there on to try to explore the social contradictions that occur in a capitalist society. I the distinction that exists, that the contradiction that exists between an idea that we have of ourselves in a liberal society, which we conceive ourselves as free individuals, we are supposed to live in democracies, that there is a certain amount of equality, and then what it happens in a capitalist society, that what it gets reproduced is a total unequal and free society. So I tried to shift the emphasis from the sonic to the social and explore this social noise that I call social dissonance. But this was extremely dry, and the only sounds that occur and the improvisation that occurred were the ones that people did in the space. And somehow, so I was coming from that form of improvisation or interaction that was more it's very, very interested in the social interaction with the audience and playing with the audience. But I also then wanted to bring it back into sonic improvisation, dealing with, getting back into improvisation, but with my own, all the things that I have learned from doing this social dissonance project. So this was like the beginning, it was more like a continuation of that type of approach of trying to play with the audience, play with the audience, and being played by the audience. So that kind of interaction. And what I tried to do with this is kind of play a lot with forms of estrangement and like people having to reconsider or having to think, what is it that am I offered with? If, as you said, it's the first concert, it's the beginning. That usually you are supposed to present something, but what I present is a question. Mm-hmm. Then who is the active? If somebody replies, then who is the active participant there? What is going on there? So, but what the first intervention did was to allow for a general reflection of where we were at that time in 2019 in this specific neighborhood in Lisbon, which at the moment, that time it was getting very gentrified, and it seemed like a very specific point in the city where then the tension, where then after the pandemic, many digital nomads kind of moved there, but that was already happening at that time in 2019 before the pandemic. But so it was a bit a form of a situated improvisation together with the audience, which they became a crucial part of the process. Once again, they became very important.
Yeah, there are some really curious moments throughout the set, specific things that happen throughout these interventions, which are presented, like they're recounted in the booklet, but also you hear during the audio. And the one that I really like is this person yelling stop during the second concert, where from what I can gather from the audio and reading about it, just people started moving their chairs very intentionally and making a lot of noise while so you're working with contrabassist Margarita Garcia in this performance, and people just started moving their chairs around and making a lot of noise, and then someone was like, stop, it hurts. But I wanted to hear from you more about that. Like, what was going on in the build-up to that moment where that person yelled out, stop?
Yeah, so that was the second intervention, and there it was very interesting because for me it was, collaborating with Margarita Garcia, which is somebody who I love very much, and I think she's one of the most interesting musicians that I have ever met. And we have a history of working together since 2003 or something like this, or 4, for a long time we have collaborated at different times, but I haven't played with her for quite some time, but there is always a level of affinity. And here we were, this concert was very much marked by the pandemic and the constraints and rules that we had to follow for the concert. So there was only 10 people in the audience, and there was a lot of distance between each other. And then at some point, there was conversation with the audience while Margarita and I were improvising more musically, and yeah, at some point we started to play with the chairs, and then the audience joined, and it became this cacophony, which it was pretty amazing. Also, the the building was quite special, and it had glass, so the sound was quite intense, I guess. But yeah, I think on the one hand, for some people, it was a bit of, oh, we're doing something together. So we had this kind of cathartic element to it. But for mother, for her, she hated it. She really hated it. She really did not. And it's interesting that instead of trying to leave, she said stop, and
Yeah.
we all I guess it's part of the improvisation. We all stopped.
Yeah. Another facet of the ongoing series has been the introduction of DJ Marfox, who becomes involved in 2021. So I believe I remember you telling me, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is his first experimental or improvisatory collaboration. So what was it like working with him?
It was amazing. It was really, really, really special. Yeah, thanks to Nelson from his managers from Principes Records. We had, I guess, the year that we did this intervention with Margarita and the chairs. I knew that he had collaborated with a good friend, Natasha Sahadrindra, for the Venice Biennial project. So he had done things with artists, so that already kind of made me understand that he was willing to try things out and to experiment. And we had a conversation, and he was very open and actually very much willing to do things and to experiment. And then when he came, it was amazing, because even though what he said is like, no, it's the first time that I will be playing with somebody and with instruments and to improvise. And then he was just a real, it was a total real natural improviser. Maybe natural is not the right term, but like he was amazing. He had a total mastery over the decks and really willing and open and trying things out. And yeah, it was amazing how well he was able to adapt to whatever we were doing, which was, I think, or I hope that we were doing was quite experimental, but he was totally on it. And in fact, we did play also with Margarita. We played in, a couple of other concerts, one with Billy Bow, and then another one as a trio in Cáceres, in the Vostel Museum, in a festival. So it felt very good to play with him, and he was, I think, a very important part of the project.
Wicked. I want to ask one more question about the record at this point, but I also want to make clear there's like so much to ingest with this project. So this is the tiniest slither. I really do encourage people to check out the whole thing, because there is just so much material here that really makes this project so rich. So the last thing I wanted to touch on in this intro, though, is about actually making the record, because it's so interesting how each of the pieces are structured. You have this expanding duration throughout the set where each track gets longer each time by 4 minutes. So the first one 4 minutes, second one 8 minutes, etc. But you have this sense as well of oscillating between events that are happening within the space. I don't know, there's some sense of scrambled time. Also the room kind of shrinking and expanding as well, due to the way that the kind of acoustics are presented on the set. So what was it like taking these interventions and taking these materials and making like a record, a sonic record? What was driving how you went about making that?
Well, it is a format that I'm fascinated buy. I love records. It's one that I feel very comfortable. Maybe I've done many records, and
Uh-huh.
I love it. I love the format. I love the constraints that they have. Even though I studied art and art theory, like what I do often are concerts and records, and then I also work with books. But I guess it's a format in which I'm used to the constraints, but at the same time I'm trying to expand what it might be, or trying things, to experiment to what it might be. So I think what is interesting is the contrast of accumulating this material and then all these thoughts, and then kind of putting them together into something that is obviously edited, and it is something else. It becomes something else. This is something that I also been interested in my practice, which is how to take into account the way that a documentation or a crystallization or putting something into a format of a record, then it becomes something else. Mm-hmm. Which on the one hand, it contains elements that come from the past or a recording from a concert, but at the same time it becomes something else which shapes the way then later on people will perceive it in the future. And in fact, I have a question for you, because I know that, yeah, it's, as you said, it's maybe a dense record, but so far, it hasn't, almost didn't get any reviews. Yeah. And I think it might be because it demands different kind of engagement, or, it's just maybe too, like, I don't know. I get the impression it's like, oh, this might be too much I'm still trying to work out. I find that I think there is something going on there, which I still don't understand. I haven't, you are the first person that I ask you, why do you think that this record didn't get, any reviews? Just one, I think, is.
Yeah. Well, that's a really interesting question. I think one thing is I think that I've heard a lot of labels say this. I don't know whether this is reflected in your experience as well, but getting reviews generally seems to be harder for some reason. Maybe there's less outlets, or just more content trying to vie for review. I think a lot of sites and publications, digitally anyway, are now opting for review roundups as well, which seems to be, I think, quite a recent fixture, where a lot of releases get, say, like a single paragraph, but it's one article that covers 8 releases in one go, maybe to deal with the problem presented in my first point. And I wonder, with that in mind, whether your project requires a depth of engagement that maybe means that it slips to the back of the list, because people are like, I've got this record that manifests exclusively in sound. I've got my little setup where I sit and listen to it and write as we go, and then I've got a review by the end of that hour. And maybe with your record, because it requires also reading and I think engaging with a wider context outside of the release itself, maybe there's an exertion required that people just aren't, in amongst all the things that they want to review, just aren't getting round to. One thing I found really interesting, and I kind of disagreed with it, was a review that I think you published on your site, which basically said, I wish at this point Mattin would just release a book and kind of do away with the record, which I was like, wow, that's not my perception at all. The sonic element seems to be really integral, or really adds a lot of complexity to my reading of the experience. And that's the other thing I think as well, is maybe because it is a work of which sound is a part, but extends beyond explicitly manifesting within sound, maybe people are struggling to fit it into the context of reviewing sound. And maybe that's someone's specialism, where they're like, I review sound, this perhaps just stretches beyond their area of what they're comfortable writing about? What do you think?
I think you are right. I think I think it's like, or you think you are trying. I think I'm trying to do something with a record that is pushing it to a bit farther. But I guess in these times where people are overwhelmed with things to do and to, as you said, it's like, oh, it would be nice, but actually you put it in the back of the, it's like, I cannot, this is too much. This is, there is no incentive enough, or maybe it requires an effort that, people don't put it in their preference as an effort to take into account, because how do you where do you start? And I guess, I knew that this guy Mark Cuthbert, who wrote, I'm super glad that you read that review, because I really like him. He's from this punk band Peace Gens, and at least he always reviews, and he engages, and he doesn't really like conceptual stuff, but I really love. And sometimes he can be extremely funny, and but I knew that this will be, I knew that he will not be very open to. But at least I'm super happy that he did it, and it's the only one pretty much, that engages with it. But I've been obsessed with reviews. I see them as part of the process of doing something, and then you get some feedback, and then you learn from it. You learn, you get maybe some references. I always been. It's like what you get is so rewarding that it gives you like energy to do more things. But so for me, this record has been a bit of a. I don't know if a breaking point, but like I stopped pushing for reviews. It's just like, okay, it's there. If at some point any people want to engage with it, is there, and I'm not gonna be behind it. Like, I think it's worth doing it. Put it up. It's a quite painful thing to do to beg. But I know that it's getting harder and harder. But anyway, I really appreciate you taking the time with it.
Oh, sure. It's fucking great. So I really want people to check it out, and I will put a link in the show notes so that you can do just that. Mattin, we should go to your important records now. So one question I like to ask at this point is about how you thought about the word important when picking your list of records. So is there a way that you understood the word important in order to come up with the list of 3 records that you did?
Yeah, at the beginning, I thought, because I often, when I do interviews or engage in podcast or doing things, I think whether there could be a conceptual way to approach this and kind of denaturalize to a certain extent the format, or be conscious of the format and try to do something a bit different. But but I was overwhelmed with things to do, and time was happening and was coming in, and then it really shifted into actually records that are important. So I took it very literally. These records are the ones I was thinking of putting. Maybe 2 records, other records that I didn't put, Batilia Lake, and then Klein Frozen. But I actually, they've been important, but certainly not as important as these records, actually, if I look it into my life, So I was thinking of but actually, so I shifted and went very straightforward. These are 3 records that I have engaged with them, or they really have been important, and to a certain extent they represent a variety of forms of practices that I'm interested in.
Cool. Which one do you want to go for first?
Yeah, I was rereading the email, and I saw that this was an important something that you addressed, and I actually have the order in which I think I wrote, which is not necessarily, it's not chronological, but somehow I think for the discussion it might work okay, maybe it should be, okay, we have Roberta Settles, Isolation, Meinhof in Memoriam, AMM Decrypt, Lou Reed and Metallica Lulu. And maybe, if you don't mind, if it's not too demanding, I would like you to choose. Or otherwise, we can do it in the way that I wrote them, which I think is the way that I just read them now.
Should we do that? Because I could, when someone puts it over to me, generally I say, let's do it in the order that I've got them on my sheet. But I am intrigued because I guess there must have been something driving the order that they appeared in the email, even if it was just like a subtle nudge of like, well, this one first, this one came to mind first. So there may be some kind of rationale for navigating through them that way. We'll see. But so do you want to start with Roberta Settles, Isolation, Meinhof in Memoriam? Cool.
Absolutely. And in fact, there is a rationale, because once I discovered that record, maybe previously before this, and I didn't put it, but somehow I had in my mind, the records that they somehow blew my mind, or they allow me to think differently. And actually, probably before this record came, I realized the record that was super important for me was Junko's Sleeping Beauty. And I didn't come back to it, interestingly enough, but there is a reason for it, maybe. But then I discovered this record in a record shop in Sweden. It must have been 2012 or something like this, or 11, actually, 2011. And I saw it, and just the artwork blew me away. It was just, and then the title, Isolation, Meinhof in Memoriam. It was, what is this? And it was quite expensive, actually. It was maybe, it might have been even around 40 euros, but the artwork, yes, blew me totally away. It was like love at first sight. And if you've seen the cover, and it has like a plastic sleeve that is printed with the name of the label, Music in Crisis, and the relationship between the political character of the title and then the extreme minimal electronic music was like, wow, I was already blown away by the work of Bernard Gunther in the end of the 90s, by the quiet, I've been very interested in noise, but I've been both interested in minimalism, noise, electronic music. And then you have a work that is preceding more than a decade that type of working, and rather than having some kind of Buddhist inclinations in the approach to do that, or that's what I think Bernard Gunther maybe, had, or that's how I understood it. I might be, missing this out. But like here, you had a hardcore political interest and approach, and extremely explicit in the cover. And the cover had lyrics and text, or not lyrics, but text, which is something that I also loved previously. From even from, I remember a record by White House called Cruise, which has lyrics, and it was like, I always loved records that had text as an artwork. So this, and then I put it on, and it was a total masterful, minimal electronic music that preceded the work of people that I had been interested, like Bernard Gunther or Francisco Lopez or others, people from the Onkyo. And it's in, it's like published in 85, and probably it was just like, it blew me away. It just blew me away. And then I tried to contact her, because she actually then started to do sandals, and she had a shop in Gamla Stan in Stockholm, and I was living there at the time. And for several months, I was going there and knock and see if she was there, and nobody was there. And then she died. And I had the luck of actually playing in the memorial concert in Filkingen. So that really made me I was super happy that they invited me.
Oh, that's great. What did you do for that memoriam concert?
Yeah, I think I had some infiltrators, as I sometimes have. So I think they were on the roof doing some kind of, like on the top, like they were on the top floor. Yeah, I guess I tried to recreate to a certain extent this, almost as if the audience were in the cell, because this record is trying to recreate when Ulrike Meinhof was in the cell in this famous prison in Germany, and how she might have been feeling, so that feeling of loneliness. And somehow I think I tried to do that. The concert hall was the cell, and then some people were playing from outside the room, like doing some sounds, but kind of creepy sounds.
Wow.
I don't think anybody got that reference at all. But anyway, so I think that's what I was trying to do. So basically that's why it's in the top, because once I saw it, I fell in love with it, and I thought this is the coolest record on earth. It's from the sound to the cover to the history of the record, because she actually. She was supposed to release it with Caprice Records, which is, I think it's a state label in Sweden, which will put all kinds of stuff, I think folk and all kinds of stuff, but also experimental stuff. And then, she was supposed to release it with this label, a state label, but they were scared of the political content of the record. So she had to release it she did her own thing herself, and even here, in the record cover, this is addressed, this is an independent record produced and distributed by the composer, So it's talking about independence and, DIY, she did it, and it's very ahead of its time in many elements. And she was of what I know of her, she was a fascinating figure. She studied with Xenakis in France, and then she was a lot of the EMS, electronic music studio in Stockholm, which is like an oasis for people working with sound, I guess she was part or connected to the whole tech sound some way, but I don't know so much about this connection. But then there was this moment with the label that they didn't allow her to publish, so they were scared, and so it's a very daring record.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I find really interesting is, I don't know whether this is from the text of the record itself or outside it, but it mentions the fact that the subject matter of the piece is not political, but rather an attempt to transmit the tensions of silence and isolation. But this is my first acquaintance with this record. There's surprisingly little, I think, online written about Roberta, or maybe it's just very hidden. I couldn't find much. But I was like, surely though, I mean, to pick a figure whose life and memory is so wrapped up in such fervent political intentions, like how could it not be political? But I wondered, as someone who obviously is so much more acquainted with this, whether you had any thoughts on that.
I think there is a lot of political connotations of dealing with this isolation, and I think that's what I've always been interested with experimental and avant-garde music, that we can call it isolation, but there is also a sense of alienation in this record, a very strong sense of alienation, and the question is like whether it comes from, and I've been extremely interested, and the book Social Dissonance deals with the concept of alienation, and perhaps here there is a connection between alienation understood as maybe an existential kind of form of desolation that one can feel, or loneliness, or fragmentation, or like an impossible to reach out, which, to be honest, I think many of us feel quite a lot, and especially after the pandemic,
Yeah.
which I think we became, or I became personally, less social, or it's like we lost the ability to socialize to a certain extent. That's my feeling, and I guess this has to do with increased forms of individualization and fragmentation. But by connecting to a figure that, such as Meinhof, that then was a revolutionary, that tried to think otherwise, then this existential makes you inevitably think of how this existential alienation is produced, and then this takes you to understand or try to approach or to address the structural forms of alienation that produce these forms of isolation. And then on the one hand you have the memoriam, an example of somebody trying to do something about it in whatever means. You can criticize it or not, but you can take inspiration. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's this is a tricky issue, but I come from the Basque Country, so there was, ETA was active for a really long time, and you can criticize to a lot. You can. There's a lot of things to criticize. To ETA and this forms violent political forms of organization. There is a lot to criticize for sure, but at the same time they were trying to work for another type of society, and that there was just the thought of people who really gave up their lives for trying to think how life could be otherwise, and that we could go beyond these forms of isolation. I find that very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like you've pretty much answered this next question in amongst what we've discussed already. It is really striking that all of this is imbued in a record which has the kind of sonic fingerprint of something, as you say, that was being produced by, say, someone like Bernhard Gunther, which, is at the other end of the spectrum when it comes to engaging with, I guess, political circumstance and this kind of subject matter. But what is it, do you think, that this record changed for you? Like, what kind of thoughts did it put into your head as to how you wanted to navigate your own practice, if it had any of those kind of effects?
I guess these records is like, maybe I think of them as allies, or put it in another way, is like, it is okay, because sometimes I think, I don't know if other people think like this, but you try things out, and we're talking of not getting many reviews on the record, on the expanding record, expanding concert, so it's like, okay, you try things out and maybe people don't give a fuck, but there is people who have done things in the past that maybe people didn't give a fuck for a while, but it wasn't because the reason was not because it was not meaningful, but perhaps because it was meaningful in such a powerful way, or in such an interesting way, in such a way that it cut through what the consensus of what was possible at the time. That's why now we can see it, and see how ahead of its time it was. And then maybe people didn't know how to place it. So then they become like allies in the sense of thinking like, wow, this person went for it, did what she thought she should do, and did something that is so important for at least me, and I think there's the people who know about it. I think they have absolute total respect, and it got reissues, so.
Mm-hmm.
But they are like this. I guess that's something that I've always been fascinated by. I'm a huge fan of the Velvet Underground and the Stooges, and for me this, or Henry Flint, or people, or AMM, which then we will go ahead, is people who maybe at the time they did not have the recognition that they deserved, but they were giving and producing something that it was rich and powerful, and that maybe people didn't know what to make out of it.
Yeah.
But with time, suddenly you understand better the complexity of what it was produced. So it's and it allows you to then think, and opens up. It's like it opens up like, wow. It opens up for a really deep, thorough engagement in which you don't have the clues of how to take it, or they are there, but you really need to engage with it. But at the same time, it allows you for thinking differently or opening differently. And for me, there's like certain conceptual records that maybe I have not listened to it so much, but then it's like they open doors for, yes, it is possible to do this. There is like, there were two records that I thought also of, but one is quite complex because it's by Eric Smith, and it's like a homage by Eric Smith with many others, and it was published by Recital Records from Sam McCann, and Sam McCann was also very much involved, and it's a box of few records it's like a series dedicated to saints, to different saints, St. Paul and others, and that record also is just like, I haven't listened to it so many times, but when I open it up, it's like a Pandora box, it opens up so many possibilities, and like, wow. And this type of records are the ones that then suddenly allow you to think differently, and it's okay. It's okay to try things out and do things that they might not get much attention or recognition at the time, but maybe in the future other people, suddenly other people find it interesting, and like I did with these records that I'm talking today, and yeah, it's like so I think of these records as some kind of allies.
With that in mind, let's go to your second ally record. So AMM, The Crypt, which I believe came out in 1968, right? I've got that.
No. That's, in fact, I was looking at it because it came out actually in 81.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I don't know. I should ask Eddie Pribos, the drummer and the guy who the label behind Much Less Recordings. I should ask him, because he actually gave me a copy of the LPs without covers, and yeah, that's one of the most precious record that I ever got. It was really, really special, and it seems it's like the evil record of AMM, or let's put it another way, it's maybe the noisiest record of AMM.
Uh-huh.
And for me, it combined these two interests that I always had of noise and improvisation. And once again, 80, 68, and it's so, once again, I find it so ahead of its time, and like, it's, for me, it was just like, okay, I was interested in the noisiest part of the Velvet Underground, but here it's just, you just get it relentlessly. It's
Yeah.
just that there is, you take away all the song structures and all that. It's just like, it's just full on. But it's a very careful kind of cacophony, and yeah, it's once again super difficult to grasp, and like, and this makes it, opens up your mind to, like, I guess, a form of curiosity, or a form of, like, it always gives you back when you listen to it, and it gets you, I guess these two records that we're talking about, they have a very special mood, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just differently. They're very serious moods, but they put you in a mood, and it's like, yeah, and somehow you might be in a certain mood, or you might be sad, or you might be happy, or whatever, but then you put these records and they somehow force you. It might be too much of a term, but you need to get into a form of engagement, which, yeah, to a certain extent, brackets, or is so intense that you need to confront it, and to engage with it, and you're not gonna get it. You're not gonna get it in either if you listen to it many times, and this is like something so rewarding. Yeah, sometimes you listen to records that maybe are more obvious, and after a while they exhaust themselves, or your relationship to it becomes a bit exhausted, or you become a bit tired, or you feel kind of familiar. You become familiar with the codes or the tropes that are being used. But these two are something else. And then here, talking about allies, it's like Eddie Prevost is a real ally. Is had the pleasure and honor of going to his workshop in London, and it's an improvisation workshop that it changed my life. It's happened every Friday, and there I met some people that I'm still very good friends with, and we got totally involved in improvisation, and starting to do concerts and do things, and actually travel the world, and engage in this practice, which I'm kind of coming back with a friend, with David Grundy, where we starting to do a workshop that is
Yeah.
similar, like, it follows on Eddie's workshop, but we try to open it up to, non-musicians and people, or non-music people can bring, problems, political concerns, poetry, whatever they want to bring, we try to improvise with. But it's like going back to that moment that it opened up so many things to me.
Yeah. On your workshops that you're going to be doing, what is it from your experiences within Eddie Prevost's workshops that you wanted to carry forth into your own? What specific qualities did you want to bring to the ones that you're doing?
Yeah, the emphasis on listening, and some structural decisions that Eddie would made, which is like going on circles. So two people start, then the person on the left, let's say, stops, and then the person on the right starts, and then there is that duo. So those structural decisions, that then the emphasis on listening, and the openness to, it's an openness that is not free for all, but there is an understanding of, like, okay, we are here, there is this time, we can try things out, we listen to each other, and let's see what happens. But there is an extremely good balance between people trying things out and not overpowering others. So by having the emphasis on listening, and to, allow others also to do things, and most of the workshop, one might be listening, but listening with as a very active role, and that is a very powerful tool. This listening, but open to what can happen, and then people also feeling encouraging to try things out without being judged. So the suspension of value judgments, to a certain extent, that's also very important. And the generosity, like the generosity of Eddie, that's something just incredible.
And you've collaborated with Eddie as well in Cicada, right? So how did that come about on the back of the workshop?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I started going to the workshop in 2000, May 2000, because I saw a flyer from the LMC in the concerts that I used to organize, and it took me months. It's like when something important, often in my life, it's like it takes, I didn't have the courage to go there for a while until I went in May, and I went with a melodica, and it was like, oh, I feel home here. This is the place where this is what I really, really wanted to do all my life, And yeah, by then, I guess, I don't know, by February 2001, before I asked him, I was playing them laptop. Then I went into play laptop computer, and I was doing solos, computer solos, and then playing a bit. And then I asked Eddie if he wanted to record with Rosie Parlane, which is an amazing musician from New Zealand who was playing in a band called Thela. So it's interesting. So it was a trio, Thela, with Dion Workman and Dean Roberts. And I guess I was maybe in the back of my mind, I'm just thinking this retrospectively, but maybe I was influenced by Thela being a trio, maybe also the Dead Sea, And then I was playing quite loud computer feedback, which somehow is not, then the first recording that I did with Eddie and Rosie is not so far away from the crypt in the way that it's improvisation, but it's quite noisy and it has an industrial kind of sense to it. Yeah, and it was with two drums. So Rosie was playing drums, but he came more from the. Yeah, I don't know if you know, as you've written on post rock, you know Thela?
The name rings a bell, but other than that, not really. No.
Yeah, because it's like Dead Sea, AMM, Slint. So it has like a kind of post-rock element, but much more. So he was playing drums, and it's like more like a rock set, like a rock, format. And somehow I wanted to combine these elements, and in fact I asked first Eddie to play the full set, but then we went into and we tried one session that it was more noisy. I really wanted something like quite full on, but that one didn't work, and then we went into a much more kind of open and spacious approach. But yeah, I mean, Eddie was totally open to suggestions and to collaborate with the people that we work with. In fact, there is a record that Green Cram is going to put out, which is a trio with Jan Souray and Anthony Guerra, and it's a recording from 2000, and we all came from the workshop.
Oh, sweet! That's
so
great.
then we asked Seymour Wright, the saxophonist, to write the liner notes, and he wrote about the workshop. So it's all about this moment of the workshop. And now we are thinking of maybe with David Grundy and Seymour Wright to maybe try to do a book or something reflecting on the workshop, because it was so important. It has influenced so many people, and a friend said that Eddie, thinks that maybe around 600 people has been going to this workshop. So this workshop has been truly been inspirational.
Wow. Another prominent member of AMM at this point, and on the crypt specifically, is Keith Rowe. So in researching ahead of this, I came across this 16-page forum thread on I Hate Music about a collaboration performance that you did with Keith that seemed to spark a lot of very vigorous back and forth. And I think I've seen you describe it as, at that point at least, the hardest concert of your life. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Yes, very much. It was, in fact, Cream Cram is also going to put that record out.
Really? The whole...
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I wanted to ask about your experience of that, unless you've talked it to death, but it was so fascinating to see your recounting of it and people's opinions. What are your memories of doing that performance?
Yeah, it was a moment in the whole electronic improvisation scene that there was, I guess, like different approaches to how to do it, and there was very strong discussions, as you could hear, and maybe there was a perspective that it was more phenomenological, much more based on experience and sounds, and trying to basically engage with the sonic elements of it. And maybe others, like Taku Unami and Diego Chami and Miguel Prado, that we were more interested in the conceptual side of it and trying to challenge certain assumptions in regards to improvisation. So what is activity, what is passivity, what is the role of the audience, what is the material. I think at the time I was very influenced by this philosopher Francois Laruelle, which he thinks about an axiomatic decision in which you just kind of follow a decision through. On the one hand, there were two concepts. One is this axiomatic decision, and the other was to see something without any hierarchies. So for me, this axiomatic decision was like, okay, I take one decision and that's my instrument, that's what I based. Then the improvisation will happen around, and I just accept, from whatever it happens, I listen to it and follow it through. And then this other idea is that you will not make any hierarchies within the material. What Keith is doing, and then what people are doing, the sounds that they're doing, maybe when they leave the room, when they move around, when they were tired. So the idea was that these things will get collapsed into the recording. I mean, I guess, one will need to explain the structure of the concert, which was my decision was that I knew that the concert would get recorded. So then I asked the person who was recording it to basically record the whole concert, and when the first people clap, then the whole recording of the room, of the ambient room, will get played back in the room. And the thing is that nobody clapped for, I guess, an hour and 50 minutes or something, like really, really long time.
Yeah.
And that, because I guess the audience had this power that they didn't know they had. and that's, and Keith played one of the quietest and most beautiful concerts that I've seen him, and I finally enough Cream Cram will also, this Irish label will publish these recordings.
Amazing. And that includes the point of playback as well, or was because the recording was stopped at that point, is it essentially the 1 hour 50 up until they played the recording back into the room?
Yeah, it's kind of, it takes half of it, 74 minutes of just Keith Rowe, so just the ultra minimal he's playing, and I just remove some frequencies to make it as clean as possible. And then the other half of the concert, like the another 74 minutes, you get the second part, the recording of the recording playing in the room.
Nice.
So it's like you have these two very different views. One, related to absence, and then the other one related to kind of addition, everything there.
Mattin, let's go to your final important album now. So, yeah, this is Metallica and Lou Reed, Lulu. So, you've given me an introduction, I guess, as to why each of these records is important to you so far. So, it'd be great if you could do that for this one too.
Yeah, I mean, I think this record was the one that killed rock and roll, or it was the last rock and roll record that either, it was like saying, either you accept that rock could mature and be mature, which I think this record is what it's trying to do, and take it into the next level, or it disappears, it dies, and I think people did not want rock to mature, to take it to the next level. That's, I mean, obviously this is a generalization, but I really thought that it was the last great rock record that tried to go beyond the confines of what rock should be, but nobody wanted to go there. Mm-hmm. I mean, nobody, the interesting thing is that I guess it was the beginning of social media, and it got so much hate. It's like it kind of punch, like it pinch a nerve there that I guess I'm still trying to understand what it was, and people got so, it gave it so much venom and so much hate to it that it was fascinating to watch, and I'm still, I come from rock too, and this was, definitely the coffin. It's like putting rock into the coffin. It could take it into another different. I think if people will have followed through and do something with what it had to offer, I think rock could be in an interesting place. But somehow people wanted to. They put it through all these criticisms. They made a coffin out of it and they bury it. And I'm always waiting for it to, to be deburied and to take it back and to, but it's still, I think only David Bowie said that it was a masterpiece before he died, and that people will get it at some point. But I still try to read reviews, and very little. It's not coming back anytime soon. Full on.
No.
But I still hope so. It has so many elements that I find it fascinating. Like trying to adapt this Framby Decking play, but totally perverted with one of the biggest rock bands in history with Metallica, which I think they were overwhelmed, or it's like. They got transformed, manipulated, shaped into something so special and, quite unique. But like people hated it so much.
I found the cultural response to this one really fascinating as well, and I think that has heightened my relationship with this record, just to know that it caused such a furore when it came out. what is it about the record specifically, like it for its own sake or in its own right rather, that makes you interested in it? Like outside of the response to it at large, what is it about your own engagement with the record that you think makes it worthwhile for you?
I guess the ambition of it, the ambition of trying to do something else, and the relationship between text and the delivery of the text, and also has to do with Lou Reed's whole career. And it's like he produced some fuck you records that took some time to be understood or realized or to be appreciated. And it's like, then there were once again, it was something they were so charged, there were so many elements there, and it was doing something that people did not appreciate them for one reason or another, or did not take it, or even further, it pinched a nerve. And I guess, this pinching a nerve is what I'm interested in, and you think of Berlin, such an amazing record, and people hated it totally. Then Metal Machine Music, even more, it's but then they got, through the years, they got their own, like he got to perform Berlin, a play with Julian Schnabel, and like to get everything, like to be very much appreciated. The same with Metal Machine Music when it got performed by the Zeitkreiser and Ulrich Krieger, and Metal Machine Trio, so they got the redemption or the moment of appreciation, but this still hasn't got at all, and I'm curious to see when it comes. But yeah, I guess sonically it's so ambitious. It's just like trying to mold rock into something else, and not trying to fit into an established understanding of what rock is. It's a hybrid. It's a wrong hybrid that it's like a wrong hybridization that is of the elements is like, I guess what people are, many of the reviews said, it's like it just feels wrong. But I think in that wrongness, there is it says so much about it kind of points towards why is it that people cannot take it, or it threatens people. It threatens people, and I think it's because they cannot take this. Oh, it's like you are playing with my with my genre that it makes me feel so good usually, and then this is something weird, something a bit off. Is and I guess that offness is exactly what I really love.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, tell me what you think of this, but my theory is that this has to do potentially with the aesthetics of metal specifically, which there's such at least within kind of the metal mainstream, like quite a rigidity to how that manifests. And I could imagine that if this was Lou Reed collaborating with someone else in a different genre and it seemed like a garish hybrid, or just as garish as this, maybe the rehabilitation would have come sooner, but because it was with Metallica and their place within metal, I wonder if that's the thing that people are finding hard to stomach, because as well, the lyrics that Lou is putting down, a lot to do with manhood and, impotence, like emasculation, a lot of these things, which I think metal has, maybe has gone near, and I haven't heard the right records, but I think in its most stereotypical form, probably doesn't have much to do with it. And maybe that's where the difficulty is. It's metal is just too, at least in this is a generalization, but perhaps it's just too rigid to welcome this into the fold. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think it deals with this kind of crisis of masculinity, and it is, on the one hand, it might present itself as a very masculine record, but as you said, the lyrics, they they twist that totally around, and then there is this moment in which they were hearing for the first time Junior Dad and the guitarist Kirk Hammett, what's his name? Yeah. So he started crying. So there is a moment of vulnerability there. You know, that certainly Metallica are, you know, taking themselves out of the comfort zone, and I think there is like something going on, which is like, yeah, it might seem a very masculine, you know, heavy kind of record, but it's not. It's going through the motions of problems, or like the, you know, on the one hand, you know, Lou is, I don't know, maybe he was 71, 70, you know, and it's and maybe it's a decadence. I don't know if a decadence, but like, it's like, okay, is that masculinity, like the impotence of masculinity and rock, which I think is something that then has been addressed, you know, since then.
Yes.
So I think there is something there which I find fascinating, and like Lulu, this figure of Lulu, and it's, I mean, they're really heavy issues, but it's they seem to be too heavy for even heavy metal fans. You know, it's like, or there is something going on there that it's not empowering music in a straightforward way, or it's broken in the inside, like Lulu is. You know, it's like it's twisting things around in complex ways that you cannot just like totally feel good about yourself after listening to this record, because it's a head fuck. It's, you know, if you listen to its complexity, it's emotionally draining and complex, and not, you know, you cannot just like, wow, yeah, oh, you know, great, you know, it's not, no, it's something else going on, and I love it for that.
Do you have a favorite track on it?
I guess the View, you know, View, it, I guess it's the most, you know, very straightforward, and it reminds me of the Brain Bombs or something, you know, quite, you know, like one riff, you know, just going for it, and then the relentless lyrics going on. But I remember, you know, first reading the reviews, and the more, because it's not that the people were critical, they were showing an amount of creativity, and, you know, they were viciously but super engaged.
Yeah,
it's like,
absolutely.
It really was like, it generated creativity, and people were like, so I was excited before I listened to it. I was just like, wow, you know, there's something going on here.
Yeah.
And then I listened to it, and I thought it was great. It was amazing. You know, it was wow. It's good.
Yeah. This is the thing. I don't think it's in any sense overtly bad, trying to get in the head of some kind of cultural consensus. I think to listen to the whole thing in one go, I don't understand how you can land on the side of giving it an outright critical panning. I mean, one thing I found interesting is you wrote a review of it, and the way that I came to find that review was on the Wikipedia page for this very album, because you, I think, were in the small cluster of defenders. You know, it got quite high, I think, on the Wire's end of year list of albums of the year. But then also there was this review that you wrote, which is, you know, cited and amongst the minority who really enjoyed it. So I mean, when's the last time you revisited that review that you wrote?
Some time ago, sometime, and I guess that was maybe I made, you know, so I wrote this review, so some time ago, but precisely because it feels very not of today, this record somehow, or it is not like, and I thought somehow that it still deserves some appreciation, and for me it was like I got totally engaged. I mean, it was a moment, but I think there are elements to it to revisit it, and this, what you said, you know, issues around impotence, masculinity, and emotional draining and decay and death. I mean, I don't know. There are many themes, but it's still somehow. Like it seemed that today is still quite enough record. It's not. I don't know. Maybe. Do you have any clues or something that could think you today that could make this record attractive, or is it still quite enough kind of a record?
Like, as in, when do we think that maybe it will be reappraised and people will start to? Yeah, absolutely no idea. I think it's such a complicated record. I think I'm with you though that I think its moment will come. But it's strange because I think people left clues. Like, you did your review, which was in Volcanic Tongue, right? And then there was The Wire trying to, I guess, counterbalance or vouch for it to say, look, give this record a chance. So I feel like there's been enough people trying to like light the touch paper of like a critical reappraisal. I think the thing is, it's going to take maybe a couple of centuries for it to be reappraised within the context of Metallica's canon, because I think anyone who's hugely invested in that, and that's the lens through which they're seeing this record, you have to get your head around Lou Reed as well. And I don't know, this is again very sweeping, but for a lot of Metallica fans, certainly the ones I've spoken to, Lou Reed is so far away of what's aesthetically interesting about Metallica. This is a very scenic way of saying I have absolutely no idea. Yeah. And that's why it's fascinating to talk about it, I guess, on this podcast now, because it's not like this is going to come out when it's riding that wave of reappraisal.
Yeah, and it's interesting with Lou Reed because, I mean, from Sister Ray or, I Hear Call Your Name or The Blue Mask, there is, he, playing loud and, playing loud music, rock, loud, noisy rock, it's like it comes so natural to him, and and then and it was recorded quite fast for Metallica terms, but I guess it has to do with the different worlds, as you are saying, like they're so different, and it's interesting. It's such a stab at history in the sense of groups which they build some taste and they cannot get out, or something like this can really disturb their assumptions. So it cuts through. Yeah, once again, the values of judgment that are accepted or not by some people, and it breaks something up, and people don't want that, or so many people did not want that.
I have no morals, some think me cheap, and someone who despises the normalcy of heartbreak, the purity of love. But I worship the young and just formed angel who sits upon the pin of lust. Everything else bores me. I want to see your suicide. I want to see you give it up. Your life of reason.
Mattin, I've got one more question for you, which relates to your relationship to music as a listener. So I tend to bundle all of these things into one go, which is I'm interested in how you tend to buy music, as in where and what kind of formats you tend to gravitate towards, if you have favorites, and also where your listening takes place as well, where you tend to listen to music. So yeah, take me into that.
Well, I mean, when I started, the Walkman was really, I felt, that was really amazing. And then I had a Ghetto Blaster, and that's when I was copying a lot of tapes, and that was really the beginning. And then it has changed through the years, but I guess copying has been an important part of it. So I was keep copying CDs when that was possible. So I love that part of it, the piracy of it. But then yeah, I got at some point, I guess, a record player, and then I love the record. So yeah, I mean, lately I haven't been buying so many records, but yeah, I do buy records, and many of them in Discogs.
Hmm.
And yeah, Germany is a good place to buy records.
Right. Yeah.
And then I might get into a time, or place, or like a certain genres. I got through a time I got a lot into Nigerian Sakara music, or Waka music, or Apala, or like, so sometimes I get into or one person that I discover or rediscover, and then I want to try to or a record that is not available anywhere else. Like a friend was telling me about this Canadian band Fifth Column, and it's like I couldn't find anything, so I had to buy one record on so. And then there's these things with boxes that I have a fascination with boxes, even though I cannot afford many. But like I got one recently that I had to get it because I didn't have any original of the record. So I got the Shadow Ring box. So I'm slowly going through it, and like that's quite a massive. Like you can feel the love that is involved in collecting this. I love that kind of part of people doing a lot of effort into making a record, and then how you conceive it, or like going back to it, and it's just I have my record player, and but often my family is around, so I cannot play some stuff.
Right, yeah.
And then I have in this place, like I have a small studio in my place, and there I have good headphones, good speakers, so there maybe here I can really listen to stuff properly. But it's very random, and it goes through phases, so I don't have any like I don't have really routines, or it's very random kind of. And then maybe I might read reviews, and then this sounds good and find it, but like it goes in phases. It goes in through different phases and different modes, and
Nice. Well, Mattin, thank you so much. Like, I've loved, firstly, quizzing you on Expanding Concert, and then these 3 records were, I mean, all over the shop aesthetically, which is fantastic. Like, I've had such a good time diving into these over the last couple of days, so huge thanks.
No, a real pleasure. May I ask you, if you have time, just like briefly, for curiosity, like, what do you think of these records? Like, what?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So, Metallica and Lou Reed. So that one, I've tried to listen to that one when it came out, and I think a couple of years after, because I was just so fascinated with the critical furor, and I don't have a huge connection with Lou Reed, and I think Saint Anger is the only Metallica record that I ever owned. So I didn't have loads to like build up a huge desire to give this record too much time. So that's why I'm grateful to the podcast, and part of the reason it exists, because someone prompts me and says this is really important, and I dive in. And I thought this one was incredible. Like, I think the duration means you are right up inside it, and it's quite bizarre how in the initial moments of the record it feels so striking and unusual, and then I think when you're 45-50 minutes in, it sort of becomes your normality, and you just are able to get over the initial kind of that aesthetic combination and dive ever deeper into the content. And I guess the characters that Lou is putting forth as well just start to feel really vibrant and really complicated. And I think, more and more of the years, I think Metallica are great. Like, I think they got so much going for them, which is inherently weird, and I think Lou seems to really haul that up to the fore on that one. So love that one. The Crypt, again, another one that's durationally overwhelming. And what I liked about that one is that it almost feels like the presence of bodies in the space are quite subdued. Like a lot of the sounds feel like that they could be activated by the wind, or there's something about it where the collective noise seems to gain some precedence above people in the space interacting with each other. It's all happening simultaneously rather than like a sense of a back and forth that you can see. I get excited by a noisy record of that duration as well. So yeah, and then the Roberta Settles one is really interesting because I think it has certain hallmarks, I think, of at least from my perspective, like what maybe was going on at the EMS. And the thing that really made that one interesting, because I think purely from the musical standpoint, I think it's really curious, and I'm only in my first couple of listens to that record. There's more in there for me, but I think the collision with like that really potent political context is the thing that makes that one like really striking. So I think I'm going to spend more time with the music because that hasn't necessarily like really dug itself under my skin, but just the context is so juicy. So I'll be spending more time with that for sure.
Oh, thank you. Really, really appreciated that feedback. And one last final question, which you might have done it already, but have you done your 3 favorite records in the podcast?
Yeah, I have. I did it once when I had a gap in the schedule, and I did. There's a band called Yezu, which is Justin Broderick's project that he started after Godflesh. The first record that he did with that, the self-titled one. And then I did Sachiko M's Bar Sachiko.
Ah, wow, nice. Yeah.
And then Meshuggah, their album Nothing. So yeah, another metal record.
Great. I'm gonna listen to that podcast. Yes, Filament were a huge influence on me, and Sachiko also. And yeah, they are amazing. Like Sachiko is pretty amazing. I asked her once to play with Junko and myself, and she did not want to be part of it. I guess Junko was a bit, But
oh, really?
I thought, yeah.
Wow. Because of Junko being a very specific flavor, you mean?
I presume that it will not have been a minimal. It would have been then the record that the record that we did, just Junko and I, Pink Noise, was like kind of it has a Sachiko element, I would say, but it's a total brutal noise, like vicious. But I love Sachiko M. Yeah, very good, very good.
So good. I mean, Junko actually, I think, definitely was in the mix for maybe one of my picks.
Wow!
Yeah,
nice.
She did a record with Sachiko, but a different Sachiko. I think a vocalist called Vasilisa the Beautiful.
Nice. I haven't listened to that one.
It's complete. I think I listened to it first straight after a batch of night shifts, and so I think it kind of found an entry point into my head that meant it got lodged quite deep. But yeah, Junko's amazing. I'm glad you mentioned her in the course of the podcast, actually.
She's she's one of the most inspiring, really amazing. Yeah. Wow. Oh yeah, I'm gonna listen to your podcast more and really, really appreciate it.